Boost. Hello and welcome to No One is Perfect. This is a place where we have unfiltered conversations on life's messiness. I am Christy Foster here with Marti Murphy, and this is our podcast, and it's a way of sharing real, unfiltered conversations about healing and life and the messy in between. And today we begin with something very close to both of our hearts, which is the power of sharing your story and how sharing your truth can be freeing and also help you heal.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. It's interesting, Christy. Thank you. What a great intro. And I was working with a client today. It's right along these lines, and she's noticing how much rage she has coming up in her, like rage. And what we've discovered is for the longest time, she was suppressed, never allowed her truth. Her truth was always, diminished or counteracted. And now that she's finding her voice, and right now her voice has a lot of anger and a lot of rage, but in a healthy, safe way through the tapping, she's allowing herself her truth, and it's changing her.
How
And
exciting.
it's so exciting. And I relate to that so wholeheartedly because having grown up in the religion that I grew up in, Catholicism, and the way that I grew up in it, which was super punitive and punishing, I mean, rage has been a part of my life and such a journey because when you aren't allowed your truth, when say your story is like, oh, you don't feel that way, or oh, that's not right for you, that feelings aren't buried dead, they're buried alive, and then they show
Right.
up in the body.
And one of those key phrases that I think is an interesting piece is people will say, "What is your truth?" or "What is my truth?" And there's a difference between what is the truth. And in this context of the podcast, when I'm looking at someone's experience in their body and pain and the story behind it, what I'm understanding in that is the body is literally holding the story and the truth of the way it went in.
Interesting.
What
Yeah.
I mean by that is, as a parent, I'm a parent of two boys. Their story may be very different than my story of something that happened. So the truth of their story or the truth of my story is, something happened in childhood. It's based in the truth of how it was perceived,
Yes.
how it was taken. And it's like it takes a snapshot and freezes time. And until we can allow the space for that snapshot to be heard and understood, the tendency is to loop back to the snapshot in real time, even though it was 20 years ago.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
the body is remembering in real time as we loop into that, what happened 20 years ago is still happening today.
Oh, so true, Christy.
And
So
then the contraction in the body happens. And so as a psychosomatic therapist, when I will often tell people the body holds the story. And so what does that mean? An example of that would be if someone feels like they don't matter or they want to disappear, for example, the body will literally contract and become smaller. Sometimes you'll see people with severe eating disorders that are really, really thin. There's a wanting to disappear on some aspect.
hmm.
Um, and also, and you'll also see people that don't have a weight issue, might be the other end of the spectrum of the body closing in and even becoming larger. Wanting to disappear can appear many different ways.
Yeah.
And what happens in the body is it stays in that heightened state. And I really think that once that can be noticed and spoken out loud, and the aspects behind the why someone might want to disappear
Yeah.
is really important, because it is again in that witnessing. and speaking what it felt like, what you heard, what you still think, it begins to remove the charge out of the flesh, because the cell memory is a very real aspect of somatic work.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true, Christy, in the tapping world. Is it like we always say you'll always have the memory, but the emotional charge that's attached to it is released.
Yeah.
That makes a difference. So then you have the story, but it becomes like, yeah, that sucked, but it's just a story now. It
Yeah.
happened and all that because you've healed the emotion in that and you've validated it. And in the tapping world, as you know, it's all about speaking your truth, all about putting the truth out there. And that can sound very negative to people. And I've had this with people starting tapping. They're like, well, I don't want to relive it. And I'm like, well, you're reliving it anyway. And
Right.
so if you bring it out in the open and we tap through it, what you're doing is you're releasing it from the body, you're shifting the nervous system, you're changing the neural pathways so that you can now see it differently. And I have so many stories that I think of now that I used to like just cringe when I thought of them. Like I couldn't tell the story without feeling that charge. And now
Mm-hmm.
it's like, yeah, it sucked, but it's just a story.
Yeah. It makes me it makes me think of when I first started somatic work. I thought, well, and it's true, I had done a lot of work to even end up in that space.
Yes.
And then we did pictures of our face, and in that course we do a face split where we see the right side of the face, which is the external world, the left side of the face is the internal world, and the right side of my face looked completely square. And you can see I don't have a square face, I have a triangular face. And I remember thinking, oh my God, nothing mattered, nothing. And I went into this whole story in my head about how could I look that way when I've done so much work,
Mm,
and the judgment and all the pieces. And as I worked through the next few years of my training and teaching and speaking that story, I really never thought I would stop crying when I told my story.
mm,
And as I did stop crying, which was a good day, and what you're talking about is the charge of that story of being witnessed and seen moves. My health improved. I had pretty severe anxiety at the time, thinking I was controlling it pretty well by doing and being way more masculine than I naturally am, period. And I noticed that the anxiety changed, the headaches went down. And looking back on it now, how important it was to be seen in that, to be understood in that, and understanding that one of my values today is being witnessed in that authentic place,
mm.
allowing the space within me and also allowing it in other people. And you and I were talking earlier about authenticity,
The love
and
language.
and authenticity to me really is that part of saying what's true
Yeah.
in the moment and the experience that you're having in the moment.
Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. I think I had talked about like I realized my love language was it's authenticity and ownership. And I realized that due to this circumstance with my husband, and he was telling me this story, and I'm like, whatever, like meaning he's telling me about this guy that talked about parenting, and I'm like, okay, but does the guy practice it? Because a lot of us can
Yeah.
spew the rhetoric, but are we actually practicing it? And then he made this comment about himself as a father, and I noticed like my heart opened, and I was like,
Mm.
oh, like I love that authenticity of like, no, I'm flawed, fallible. I'm in a body, having a human experience. I have those things. And for me, that is so important. And I would also say I've been very fortunate in my life that I've had many practitioners that I've worked with for my stuff. And most of them I found to be very authentic. And then when I eventually find out they're not, our worlds go apart.
Yeah.
And I just can't speak enough about, I mean, we talk about this all the time, Christy. It's just like owning your story, speaking your truth. And I had that this morning. I was actually tapping while I was hiking, and I was doing this visualization of myself as a young person at 6 when this nun beat me in front of the class. And it came to me like I brought like my adult self in, say the warrior self in, and was like, talked to the little girl, the 6-year-old me, and was like, hey, I've got this. I froze the screen. I've got this. I've got this. I've got this. And it was
Mm,
the nun that did that. And I was looking at her face become gleeful because now someone was going to step in and protect her. And then I was like, hey, we're going to go live now. I'm going to unfreeze the screen and we're going to
mhm,
go live. And then I confronted the nun on her behalf, and she's behind me. And I know the subconscious doesn't know the difference. And what came up, Christy, was all the times in my life in early childhood where I'm telling the truth, but no one would listen or no one would believe me.
mm.
And that came up today while I was tapping, and I'm like, whoa, no wonder I've had so many experiences in my life where I'm like, I'm telling the truth. I'm being a good girl. I'm trying to do the right thing, but I'm not being believed. It's like in EFT, we call that a cognitive shift. Like all of a sudden, it was like, oh, no wonder I've had that experience in my life and
Yeah.
reparenting that child.
And I appreciate, Marty, that you brought in the archetype of the warrior, because I would like to talk about that a little bit because it's relative to what we're speaking about. There's 4 survival archetypes. Carl Jung came up with them. Carolyn Mace has explored them so much and created such a beautiful work. And one of the archetypes known as a survival archetype is the victim. And the transmutation to warrior, which is what you just named. So if we were talking about a 6-year-old, she was victim to an experience of not being believed. And sometimes through a life story, and I don't know if this is for you growing up, Marty, if that was perpetuated because that became your experience.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And at some point in your life, that warrior archetype, that pattern of no longer is this going to happen, intervened.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And what I love teaching people is, what would your warrior say?
Yeah.
How would your warrior embody? Like, how literally would your body stand? A warrior would not disappear,
No.
a warrior would not shrink back.
Right.
What's the difference of how a warrior would, how would the voice sound in a warrior? How would the body hold space
Yes.
while you confronted the nun?
Yeah.
And the beautiful piece that you were speaking about is that reparenting of that little child in you to, like you said, stand behind me and I'm going to handle this. And you change that snapshot. And I guess, Marty, too, that part of, I'm sure you've worked on that memory before. And
Oh my God, so
you're
many
how old
times.
today?
I was 62.
Yeah. And I think sometimes the challenging part is people, what I hear is, I've already worked on that. Why isn't it gone?
Oh my God, I hear that all the time.
Then they think something's
Yeah,
wrong with them.
right. And I want to speak to that because in tapping, we call it aspects. So every memory has different aspects. Like, say you have a phobia of a snake, and you walk out, you see the snake, you get anxious, you tap, and then you're like, oh, you can see the snake and you're calm. But then all of a sudden, the rattle goes off, and that's another, you get re triggered. That's another aspect. So you tap on that, and then you go back out, oh, you hear the rattle, but then the tongue comes out. And then that's another
Mm,
aspect. So all of our memories have different aspects. And that's why we need to go back and visit them again and again. It can be the sunny sky, like the sound, it's all the
mhm,
senses, and each one of those senses being dealt with. And like I've worked on this so many times, but then it was like, whoa, there it is. No wonder. Like it was a whole new aspect
mm,
and a whole new cognitive shift for me for a pattern that I've seen in my life over and over again. And I wanted to add about the warrior, because I think this is a good example. The wild horses have shown back up at our house. And one of them that I know, who I saw her born, she's with a new partner, male, and they're super skinny because last year they banned us from feeding them. And I can't help it if they go eat my bird seed. It's sitting out there and I'm not going to stop them, and we can give them water and that. And while they were there, another stallion with his herd, all of a sudden they're coming down our road and I'm out there cleaning up horse poop. And Christy, I was like, oh no, not on my watch. And this is a big animal. And I had that moment because he's charging towards me. I had that moment of hesitation. And I'm like, nope, you can't hesitate with this guy. And then
Right.
all of a sudden I like stood stronger, stood solid, like that Wonder Woman pose. And I'm like, no, like that. And then he like the stallion stopped dead in his tracks. And then I chased him and the herd off. And he came back two other times. And each time I like dug in more, and then they didn't come back. And I thought my posturing, that moment of hesitation
Mhm.
was like a bit of cowering. But then it was like, no. And of course, protecting these two super skinny horses because the other stallion is hurt and he doesn't need to get in a fight with another stallion. So I was like, no, I'm going to intervene here. I'm going to intervene with Mother Nature.
Yeah.
It just it felt really good, but I really noticed about the energy when you're congruent. That being knows that.
Yeah. And being the horse and another human being.
Exactly.
And I think it's natural because you brought up another point of that hesitancy pattern and noticing it and still stepping in. Because I
Yes.
think both can exist at the same time.
I love that. Yes.
And it's the noticing of our patterns. And that's partly why we're doing this podcast is what are the patterns being held? What is going through your head, but what's happening in your body when
Yeah.
you shrink back, when you shut down, like when you might clench your jaw or your fists, when you're having a conversation or holding your mouth tightly. All of those are it's information about your response to what's happening or your response from your own story.
Yes.
And I, Marti, I feel like our whole purpose here is to empower people that that's quote normal.
Yes.
Everyone has that.
Yes.
And in that choice point, can you still step in as warrior,
Yeah.
as the sovereign to choose differently sometimes, not all the time.
Right. You can't always. And to
No,
make
you
that
can't.
okay too. Like that is so important when you're like, I just couldn't do it then. I just
Yeah.
can't. And even in those, I noticed that in myself. Like some days I'm more secure than others. Some days, I remember one time we used to go up to Colorado and have quarters to go get this spring water that we get. And we were stopped at this bank, my husband and I, and he's like, hey, okay, take that money in and see if you can get the quarters. And I said, I'm feeling really insecure today. And this was during COVID and they put limits on what you could get. I said, I don't feel like I'm empowered enough to demand more. Can you go take care of it? He goes, oh yeah. And then he took care of it. And it was like to notice that now I feel vulnerable. My kid's a little more activated today, but to not make myself wrong for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then to ask for help. And then, like I said, my husband's like, yeah, I'll handle it, like that. That's huge because I always say acceptance, 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 acceptance. It's
Yeah.
learning to accept all parts of ourselves, particularly the ones that we want to reject.
Yeah. I so agree. It makes me think of there was an experience a couple years ago. I was in a conversation with someone that this gentleman, I would often have a trigger being in his space. I totally own that. And something happened, the trigger came, and my practice had been up to that time, Marti, observing my inner world, my inner reactions in my body. And so it was much easier for me that time to offer that acceptance and compassion. And I would say my warrior showed up as the observer
Oh, I love that.
because I would never fight with this person. It's not my nature.
Yeah.
And however, my warrior didn't let any of that energy penetrate. I witnessed,
Right.
I observed, and then afterwards I thought, well, I think I did pretty good because I didn't collapse. I didn't want to disappear. I noticed and I was able to let it go because it wasn't about me.
Yeah.
And in the
Chrissy,
past, it had been.
that's such an important point you bring up because that's the different variations. I mean, we both talked about my warriors, like, I'll just jump in the middle of it and like, oh, let's throw
That
down.
is your warrior.
And it's such a great warrior. I mean, it's like to not fight and just
Mhm.
to notice and observe that and be like, oh, okay. And for me, I'm like, I was over here, now I'm over here, like, oh, take care of it. And to learn that place in between where it's like, I don't have to draw swords all the time,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. It's, well, I really think it's important for people to maybe be curious about how your warrior shows up
I love that, how it
because
shows up.
it's
Yeah.
different. And you
It,
think of, we have some friends that are, they're Quakers, which they're peacemakers, right? That's what the Quaker is known for, is not war, peace. And I really appreciate that model of peaceful warrior.
oh yeah, I love that. I think of Dan Millman, The Way of the
Yeah.
Warrior. I
Yeah.
mean, I love that peaceful warrior.
And then we also need the other warrior
Yeah.
who will stand up and will do the fight.
Yes.
Both are needed. I don't think either one is above another. One is not more courageous than another.
No, no, no.
But how is that for you as, and I'm not asking you, Marti, but how is that for you as our listeners to, what is your warrior and how does it show up? And can it, you be curious about the next conversation or um, instance when triggers can come?
Yes.
Can you observe it in a different way? And maybe we could do some tapping around that, Marti,
Yes, absolutely.
about this warrior archetype, because we all have warrior in us.
Yes. We're not cookie cutter. It shows up differently for all of us. And I thought of one time where a woman was real like 3 times my size, like tall and like MMA fighter type, and like confronted me. Like it was just so bizarre at this Costco. And I felt her coming up behind me, and I turned and I just stood my ground. I said, go ahead, take the first swing. That's literally what I said to her. And it was calm and all that. And, she made a comment, threw a cup in my face, and walked off. And I noticed that I was chuckling when I walked away, and I turned and looked at the crowd, and they're like, what just happened? But that was more that empowered, but I don't need to fight with her. Go
Yeah.
ahead. I mean, she could have clocked me all the way to the back of Costco, but I was like, no, go ahead, take the first swing. And nothing aggressive or, like that's a variation of that.
Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
great example.
Yeah. So, yeah, the ways, yeah, let's tap.
Let's do.
So, karate chop, even though we all have a warrior inside of us, but I don't know, I might think I don't. And that's okay. I choose to honor my truth right now. Even though that warrior archetype has pros and cons. And what if I could just open to the idea of being the observer of how the warrior might show up for me? I choose to honor my truth right now. Even though when I think of warrior, that's battle.
Mm.
That's swords. That's aggression. But what if there's a whole nother way to see that? That's really empowering to me. And then we'll just follow along the eyebrow. This warrior archetype. This warrior inside of me. Maybe I've explored that. Maybe I haven't. But what if just by listening to this right now, I could open to the idea of observing a warrior within me and trusting that it will unfold before me just by opening to that part of me. And what if, like anything within me, it can evolve and change?
Mm.
And I can learn to embrace this part of me that can be a protector, that can be so empowered, that has my back, that helps and protects me, and helps heal that child in me, that victim within me who got wounded so long ago. And I like the idea. I don't have to figure this all out right now, but I could open to the possibility to become the observer of my experience and maybe trust that I will be guided, shown, and provided for as this unfolds for me. That creates more empowerment within me and more grace and ease.
And I'd like to add to that is, as you do the tapping and sit there, is what does it feel like in your body to embody the warrior? Can you allow your shoulders to relax, allow your toes to unclench or touch the floor? If you're standing, doing the tapping or sitting, to relax your hips in that and pull the body up into what a warrior would show itself as.
Mm.
It is not a masculine archetype, it is a neutral archetype. And how does the warrior hold the body? A warrior is to be seen. A warrior comes in not in fear. And to practice as you tap, to let the body move with that and relax into the archetype and the energy of power, which is choice, not power over, but to allow the body to move with you when you do the tapping. So it becomes to integrate what you just said into the cellular tissue and really start the healing process in the nervous system.
I love that. Yeah. I love how these fit together so well.
They do. And
Yeah.
they do. That's why I love working with you, Marti, because I know that the somatic work often is the missing aspect in so many modalities, because we do the work and then how do we hold it? And the practice is literally holding your body, practicing what it feels like to stand as warrior in a
Yeah.
relaxed state.
Yeah.
Not
I
a
love it.
fight, not a disappear, but just presence
Yeah.
is warrior. which is
Yeah.
what you did in Costco.
Right.
It was
Right.
presence.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
had you been in a fight mode, she probably would have punched you.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And
And
even cowering or fear, which is, I mean, there's times to do that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it was wild even for me, Christy. I was just like, whoa, like, go ahead. Like, and
yeah,
I felt no anxiety, just super calm and like, what is happening afterwards? That's why I think I chuckled to myself afterwards. I was like, wow.
yeah, and that's that power of observation, Marty,
Yeah.
because you didn't become the activation,
Right.
right? Hers
Yeah.
or yours, you were observing the activation, which took that charge out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's the perfect story. It's a great example.
Yeah. And kind of like your story with that guy that triggers you. Like I walked away and I was chuckling. I was like, I didn't personalize any. She said a few things to me and I was like, I can't even personalize that. Like, that's not even about me.
That's serious growth, Marty.
Right. Right. Those stolen moments.
That's serious growth.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love it. Such good examples.
Yeah.
And I just want to say to all of those listening that please remember that your story does matter
Yes.
and you're not alone in this world. Community is how we heal. And this is really what Marty and I are creating is a
Yeah.
community. And please know that you're not broken. I
So
think that's
important.
also a key phrase. It's we all have wounds. We're not broken and we're in the process of growth.
Yeah. It's a journey.
Yeah.
It's a journey. There's no imaginary finish line that we're going to cross and arrive at. It's like, I have a 90-year-old client. She's still doing stuff on herself. She's like, oh, and I just had this awareness. I mean, I love that.
Yeah. And
Love it.
what a great example.
Yeah.
Because I think as long as we have breath, we're
Yeah.
growing.
Exactly. Exactly.
And may we that what a good example of an elder to
Yes.
to show us what that is.
Yes. I love it.
So thank you everyone for being with us. If you like our podcast, please like and share it. Please feel
Yes.
free to send us a note if you're interested in a certain topic that we've mentioned or one that we haven't mentioned.
Yeah. We'd love that.
And yeah, we would. And we'll see you next time on No One is Perfect, the unfiltered conversation on life's messiness.